Another epidemic has been the gambling problem, and it's not going away anytime soon. It's not a conversation anymore. It's baked into the NBA experience these days. A lot of
Yeah.
fans aren't even watching the games to see who wins or loses. They're watching to see their props on DraftKings or FanDuel or Prize Picks or whatever.
Making my point, but I know you don't get it. Got cash in my briefcase, I'm handling business. They made a few racks from the head to the dentist. I'm handling shit, I'm a menace, no dentist.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the At the Buzzer podcast. I'm your host, Darren Cobb, and I'm here with the Colin Hatfield Show. We're going pretty strong in season 6 so far. This episode, we're going to talk about, we're past the All-Star break, so we're in the final stretch of the NBA season. The real separation phase has begun. And we've already seen a couple heavyweight matchups in the past week or so. You had Detroit versus San Antonio, Detroit versus OKC, Denver versus Boston, and all of those games could potentially be finals matchups. So today we're going to ask who are real contenders, and we're also going to talk about a little bit of the NBA expansion noise and also how gambling has reshaped the league. Let's get into it. Like I said, All Stars over, real season kind of just started. And since the
Mhm.
break, I mentioned those games, which all could be potential June previews.
Yeah.
So out of those teams, Denver, OKC, Boston, San Antonio, Detroit, are those 5 teams the actual contenders?
I would I would have to say so. I think especially for the East, the group of teams mentioned being Detroit and Boston are stamped. I think they're the best two teams in the conference. The Cavs could be a close third. They're a team to watch out for, but we just saw Harden fracture his thumb. That just came out yesterday, and it's something he's got to play through. And we also, he's kind of had a rough history in closeout games, rough history in tightly contested playoff matchups. So they're a team with a couple of wild cards and things you got to keep your eyes on. But Detroit and Boston are stamped. Boston, they win the turnover battle, they win the possession battle at such a high rate. Their guards offensive rebound so well. We talk so much about how great Jalen Brown has been, Peyton Pritchard as well, Joe Mazzulla. I can't really describe just how great of a coach he's been this season. And then Detroit, I think is possibly the hardest playing team in the league. Jalen Duren is a certified monster at the center position. And I know people are gonna throw a little bit of dirt on K because of the performance against San Antonio, and it was rough. But you can't forget the week prior, he put up 42, 8, and 13 at the Garden against the
Yeah.
team that everyone said was going to represent the East in the finals, being the New York Knicks. So I think those two teams are stamped. But on the other side in the West, I'm getting very concerned about Denver. Their defense and their health is something that's really concerning to me. They dropped a game against Golden State with no Draymond and no Stephen Curry. That's I don't like that. I don't like that. D'Anthony Melton as your number one option is giving y'all work. That's not a very good sign. They can't defend the pick and roll. They do so many gimmicky things, and one day we'll get a post out on this. They do a lot of gimmicky things in terms of help defense, in terms of tags, off ball coverage. But I just don't know if that's going to work in a playoff setting against teams that can shoot and against teams that can scout that ahead of time. So they're on the fringe list of contenders for me. Like they're in their own tier because they're better than a team like Houston and better than a team like, dare I say, Minnesota, but they're not quite at the level of the true contenders in the West, being San Antonio and OKC. We both know what they're capable of. Big wins. OKC dominated Cleveland, a healthy Cleveland with no SGA and no J Dub. That was an impressive win. 10 first forced turnovers in the first quarter. It was just a very thorough win. And even without their guys, it still lets you know they can be competitive on any given night.
Right. Yeah. Okay. See, I mean, we saw it last year. We've seen it again this year. They're the deepest team in the league. They have their
Yeah.
2 best players have been hurt, and not just for like a week or so. They've been hurt for like a couple months now, and they're
Yeah.
still sitting at the top of the West, which is, arguably the best conference.
Hmm.
And you mentioned the Detroit team and how Cade, he has played inefficiently, but he's also had, MVP level games. I mean, in the game when they beat OKC, Cade and Jalen Duren both had 29, I think.
Yeah.
But like you mentioned, when they lost to San Antonio, he shot, I think, 5 for 26. And, there's
Hmm.
been, the discourse as Cade, is he efficient or not? And is that going to work? So my question for you is, can Detroit win it without that consistency from their best player?
In a roundabout way, I think Cade's inefficiency is a lot more due to the people around him than his game himself. And it might sound like I'm shooting bail for Cade Cunningham, and I promise you I'm not. He can be more efficient as a finisher at the rim. He can be more efficient from three, but you also got to factor in that he's playing in lineups that are very reminiscent of the early 2000s, the 1990s. They've got a Sword Thompson, Ron Holland, Jalen Duren, and then they throw out one shooter being Duncan Robinson. And if he's not directly leading to an assist or he's creating the shot himself, they're likely not going to get a solid look. And so that's the scary thing for me about his efficiency, because when teams shrink the floor, it's really, can Cade spoon feed someone a bucket, or can he make a tough bucket? And can he do that 75 possessions out of the time that he's 75% of the possessions he's on the court? And that's a big responsibility. Like, and especially in the league today with defenses that are so complex and as switchable as they are, with teams that can throw five, six, seven, eight bodies at a number one level guy like Cade, that's hard to combat night in and night out. And for you, I'm thinking, okay, they got Duncan Robinson. Kevin Herter is on the bench for some reason. I feel like they desperately need the shooting, and they got Marcus Sasser. And we've seen in time past, when a contending team gets late into the year, they just sometimes need something to shake it up, and there's an option that you're not really thinking about. Do you think like Kevin Herter or Marcus Sasser could be, implemented into the lineup, and it would do enough to help their offense while not killing their defense?
I think so because, like you said, they add that shooting element, which
Mm,
Detroit needs that. And I mean, why did they trade for Kevin Herter if they weren't going to use him as a
right,
shooter off the bench? So
right.
I think that they could implement that. And I think Bickerstaff's a good enough coach to optimize those two players in the already 43 win lineup. I think that could
Mhm.
work.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, at this point, you've seen enough times in these competitive games versus teams with a good defense that most times Cade's gonna shine through for you. But
Mhm.
in a 7-game series, you got to expect a night or two where his shot's just going to be off, or the defense is going to play well enough to take him off of his game. So you need the extra guys that can knock down shots on the floor. And I think that's the real separator between them being outed by Boston or outed by someone else in the East, and then potentially making the finals. I don't see them beating either team that comes out of the West, but I do believe they have a real shot at making the NBA finals. But that shooting is going to need to come through.
For sure. Um, we've talked about San Antonio. They've been playing great basketball. They won 10 games in a row now. Obviously, Wemby is playing MVP level, but you have Stephon Castle also playing really well. De'Aaron Fox playing really well. Dylan Harper playing really well. I think Devin Vassell just had 28 points against
Mhm.
Detroit. Champagny, he's shown that he can have a great game. So, do you think, is it the Spurs year or not yet?
Hmm. That's so tough to say. I really do feel like we are in the era of SGA. I I think he's got kind of a chokehold on the league and on the West, but it all comes down to health. If if he's in and out of the lineup, if J Dub's not playing, they are vulnerable. They were vulnerable with those guys. But if you don't have a steady dose of their big three and the additions of Topic, McCain, all of these guys healthy and in the mix, San Antonio can definitely beat them in a playoff series. And the scariest thing to me is that in the wins they've had versus OKC, I don't remember Wemby having a standout game offensively.
Yeah.
Defensively, he was phenomenal in virtually every matchup. But a lot of those games, he was like 6 of 16, 6 of 14. He wasn't really dominant, didn't get to 20, 30, 40 points. That's got to be scary if you're an OKC fan, because defensively you can do a good job, but on stars that only last so long. Every star is going to have that night where they turn it up, regardless of how great you're playing. And my fear for OKC is that you're going to get those type of games from a Fox or from a Wemby in a playoff series, but their offense isn't going to step up as needed. And they have some of the same concerns we talked about for the Pistons. They much need the shooting. It's very important, because that's the only way that the paint is open up for SGA to be the driver and the mid-range threat he is. That allows J Dub and Hartenstein to be as effective as they are in their different roles. I also think we got to see a step up from Chet.
Yeah.
It's very weird watching him play, because sometimes you'll see it and you'll be like, okay, he's almost there. He's gonna make that leap, and we're gonna see him ascend into this, unicorn archetype that can handle the ball, move off ball. But then some nights you see him and he's borderline unplayable, because he can't take the physicality, he can't take the contact. Every time he's driving, he gets bumped off his spot. And it's a bit discouraging for me. I don't know if you feel the same, but there's times I've seen him and it's just like, you don't look like a difference maker on the offensive end. You don't look like a top 3 draft pick on that end. I could be tripping, but that's just what I see from him sometimes, and it's discouraging this far into his career and this deep into this specific season,
Mm-hmm.
when you both of your stars have been out and you've had ample time and opportunity to prove that you can step up and shoulder a bigger load on the offensive end.
Exactly. Like, this is the perfect time for you to show everyone that you are to be considered top 10, top 15 player in the league.
Right.
You're part of that big three, and those other two pieces are gone. So this is your
Mhm.
time to really shine and show that you're at that level, and he just hasn't shown it, honestly.
Mm-mm.
So when we talk about teams outside looking in, you mentioned Cleveland, and I think you mentioned Houston, but not a Knicks mention. They're not finals contenders at all.
Maybe I'm just a negative person, but I don't have a high outlook for the New York Knicks. In the game that they just lost to the Cleveland Cavaliers, Karl Anthony Towns went 5 of 5. That's horrific for reasons you might not expect. If a guy's hot and he's making shots, why is he not continuing to get the ball?
Right.
And why is your second option only getting 5 shot attempts? That falls on Jalen Brunson. That falls on the coaching staff. That falls on a lot of people in charge for the New York Knicks. And to me, that's a very concerning thing to be happening this late into the year. They don't look functional at all on the defensive end. Brunson and Towns, it's been overstated by now. We all know the struggles that they have trying to guard together. I don't think that's going to be patched, and I don't think that can be patched. The only solution for the New York Knicks to contend is that their offense has to be so high powered and so overpowered that it makes up for their defensive lapses. Typically what we've seen statistically from teams that go on to compete or win an NBA championship is that your top 15 in defensive rating. They're not going to be that. And they're not going to be that in the postseason. So you need to have a top 5 offense to overcome that. And I just don't see it from them. Karl Anthony Towns played 29 minutes, took 5 shot attempts. Mikal Bridges took 17 shot attempts.
Wow.
Josh Hart took 11 shot attempts. Jose Alvarado took the same amount of shots as Karl Anthony Towns. That is coaching malpractice. It goes back to the conversation we had a couple of weeks ago. They are not putting Cat in the right spots to succeed, and he's playing so much at the top of the key. They're trying to make him this DHO big man. You have to get him on the block. You have to let him go to work. He is a very talented post player. He loves his trail catch and shoot threes. These are all staples of his game, and he's not getting nearly the same amount of those looks. But it's concerning that no one on the roster is saying, "Hey, like if Cat's not going to speak up for himself, we have to make a concerted effort to get him the ball." I don't want to live in a world where OG Anunoby's getting more shot attempts than Karl Anthony Towns. That doesn't make sense from an offensive perspective. And I'm not trying to hate, but I just don't understand what the Knicks are doing. You've gone all in. Jalen Brunson took a pay cut. Not OG, Mikal Bridges took a pay cut. Like a lot is having to be done to go all in and try to make this team work. On paper, you should be a buzzsaw in the East. You have two elite perimeter defenders on the wing and prototype wings in Mikal and OG. You have a superstar offensive point guard in Jalen Brunson, and you have kind of the utility do-it-all face of that archetype in the league in Josh Hart. You have a offensive rebounding monster in Mitchell Robinson, who had 8 offensive rebounds in that game. Why isn't this working? There has to be something between the players, the coaches. This is just something I'm very passionate about because it doesn't make sense. It on paper, the stats, everything should work together for the Knicks to be a cohesive team to be leading the East this year. But last time I checked, they're the 4th seed, and
Yeah.
that's not going to cut it in a year where teams are injured. They don't have to deal with the Pacers. They don't have to deal with the healthy Boston, and they just jump back up to 3rd. So it's not a loss of a year. I'm not inspired by anything that they've showed recently. Sorry for the rant.
Nah. Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if you blame it mainly on the team chemistry or on the coaching schemes or rotations. I don't know, but something is going wrong in New York, and I feel like it's too late to fix it at this point.
Agreed.
But if you had to stamp your finals preview right now today, who's playing in June?
Right now, today, I'm going to stick with OKC out of the West. I believe SGA and J-Dub get healthy. And the addition of McCain, I think that's going to be so important for them in the postseason. McCain's knocking down shots, hitting threes. We've seen Isaiah Joe kind of pop back into the rotation lately. And got to clap it up for Cason Wallace, man. He's played amazing basketball while SGA and J-Dub have been out. And a lot of people forget, a lot of times guys will accept a role, and that means completely changing your game. But when the opportunity arises, a lot of these guys can get to it and give you 20 a night. So shout out to Wallace for really showcasing just how good he is. But I think their defense has kind of ratcheted back up recently. They're forcing as many turnovers. They're really making half court life difficult for teams. And McCain, Topic, they're going to add a new element that the Spurs haven't quite seen from them. So I'm going to go with OKC from the West. And in the East, I fight daily between Boston and Detroit. It's a daily back and forth. But I'm going to go with Detroit right now because it feels to me like the safer answer. They're a bully of a team, and they dominate the fundamentals well, the rebounding and the defense. I believe Cade has it in him to be that guy to take you home in big-time matchups. I'm a little bit concerned about the rest of them because if it is a scenario where you're going band for band, the Celtics have Pritchard. They have a big-time shot maker that's proven in Derek White, and they got Jaylen Brown. For the Pistons, it's really Cade. It's Cade or Cade spoon-feeding someone else. It's the same dilemma we were talking about earlier. but I just believe their defense and rebounding is going to be so strong that in a 7 game series, they're going to be able to game plan for some of the unique things that Boston does to get their guards on the offensive glass and take that away. And then that's really going to force Boston to be a tough shot making unit, which isn't their specialty. So I would go Detroit out of the East and OKC out of the West. Are we giving game predictions?
Sure. You say a series prediction. Yeah, sure.
Okay. If those two meet up, I'm going OKC in 6. And Shea takes home another finals MVP.
You said it's the SGA era, and it's seeming like
That's
it is. I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, I don't know. Those are the wow. Those are the two teams I wrestle with out of the East as well, Boston and Detroit. Um, we've talked about Detroit's flaws that have been kind of glaring recently, but
mhm.
Denver kind of showed Boston has still has their flaws. I mean, they just played pretty physical defense and they forced Boston to miss a lot of shots. But
Yeah.
if they, keep playing how they are, besides the Denver game, plus getting Jason Tatum back, I don't know. I think they beat Detroit in the ECF or wherever they would meet. But let's talk expansion, man, since,
Mm.
the NBA expansion has been kind of a topic for a while,
Yeah.
but now they're really heating up. The association is heading towards 32 teams, with
Hmm.
Seattle and Vegas being the top candidates. I think Adam Silver came out and said that. And I think it's because, obviously there's more money to be made with more teams, a renewed TV deal, blah, blah, blah. There's more global growth, but
Yeah.
also it's the NBA today is the deepest talent pool ever. There's players that should absolutely be on NBA rosters, but you can only have what I think 12 players,
Hmm.
and you got to cut somebody. So
Yeah.
with the expansion draft, there would be 8 players protected by each team, and then those unprotected guys are able to be drafted in the expansion draft, which we saw the
Hmm.
WNBA do that, I think last year or the year
Yeah.
before that. So, are you feeling the expansion? Do you think 32 teams would be a good, idea?
I'm all for it. I think there's amazing potential with having a team in Vegas, a team in Seattle, and it's easy because Seattle has history. You have the Supersonics. You don't need to recreate something. You don't need to speculate if it works, if it doesn't. They had a beloved franchise that the people didn't necessarily want to leave. I think it was much more of a business decision to get them to relocate to Oklahoma City. So you've got something very grassroots and near and dear to the fans' heart in that community over there. Vegas is a hotbed for everything entertainment. So having an NBA franchise there, there's no problem at all. And we've seen the turnout for the in season tournament. We've seen the turnout when they have Summer League in Vegas. It's always a very popular event, very fanfare centric, and the people show love to it. So I'm a very big fan. I think it would be amazing. And as far as the draft would go, there's some teams that would end up kind of vulnerable because, like we talked about, the talent pool is deep, and some teams have done a great job filling out their roster. And I'm looking at OKC's roster right now. Let's play this game real quick. If we can only protect 8 guys from OKC's roster, obviously Shea gets protected, Chet gets protected, and where's J Dub? J Dub gets protected as well. Now, outside of them, you have a litany of guys that fall in that
Yeah.
range of guys that you would theoretically want to protect. And so I'm assuming they want to keep Cason Wallace, Dort, Mitchell, I think Aaron Wiggins, Isaiah Hartenstein, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 8 guys. So Caruso goes unprotected. Isaiah Joe goes unprotected. Jared McCain goes unprotected. Their former 12th pick in the NBA draft, Nikola Topic, who's just now getting game reps, goes unprotected. So you see how that can completely shift the tide of a team and the trajectory of a team long term. Because
And the
we just talked about in the league, you're 100% right. We just talked about Jared McCain being a focal point to a series of them in the San Antonio Spurs. So a guy like that leaving, that makes a massive difference. I think it would bring a competitive edge to the league. And like you said, it would put certain guys in a spot to where they wouldn't be if they were on another team. We're seeing
Mhm.
guys take reduced roles because it's what they have to do to survive and it's what they have to do to stay in the league. But some of these guys, you might end up as the number one option for a season or two, and then all of a sudden people realize, oh my goodness, he is that good. He just didn't have the opportunity to prove it. So I'm very excited. I would love to see that happen from the league, from Silver. I think it's the right move to make.
Yeah. Question for you guys, the viewers. Let us know in the comments if your favorite team could only protect 8 players. Who's safe? Who are you letting go? But do you think the expansion draft would, you know, obviously help the NBA grow and create more stars? Or do you think it might water down some talent?
Hmm. I think it would do more good than harm.
Mm,
And some a sneaky component to this that I think is very important is there would have to be a slight shift in conferences. And so there's been talk about moving Minnesota to the East.
mm-hmm.
And I think that could do a lot for a guy like Ant. Ant is already a star on the court and off the court. But moving him to a conference where there's not a lot of guys quite like him with the personality, the marketability, it does something for your brand. I think you
Yeah.
go to the early 2000s and you look at how LeBron flourished when who was the next biggest face in the East? The Pistons were a conglomerate of good, hard-nosed defensive guys. Boston had Paul Pierce and KG. They were notable faces, but they're not face of the league type of guys.
Right.
And
Yeah.
top to bottom, the East didn't have a comparable personality to a LeBron James. So you bring Ant from the West, which has Steph, which has KD, and it's not that KD is like super face of the league material, but he is a superstar in his own right and has built up this cultural relevancy. So you have LeBron, KD, Steph, Wimby, who they're obviously pushing to kind of take that mantle from LeBron eventually. Even a guy like Luca and SGA, now you move him to where there's limited competition around him. And I think it could really help him flourish, help his brand, help the NBA's brand. So I think that would be very effective. But to get kind of back to the point of your question, I do think it would enhance player talent because now in a sense things become more competitive and you realize there's a chance for me to compete in a new city. There's a chance for me to be the guy in a city. You know, you look at some players even here in Indiana. Reggie Miller never won a championship, but his dedication to the city, how hard he played, what he was able to do success-wise for so long, he's good here forever, like for the
Yeah.
rest of his life. And
Hmm.
so you don't have to necessarily win. You don't even need to be phenomenal. But if you go to a city like Seattle and you're their first 15-year veteran and you're in the community, you're involved, you've now become a star. You've now become someone iconic to that city. There's also playing opportunities in terms of like we just mentioned in terms of I can be a number one now, or I was the fourth or fifth best guy on my original team, but now I'm the second or third option. So when the game's on the line, like it's a thought that the ball could be in my hands now. And that makes a difference in the way that a guy plays. It makes a difference in confidence. It builds up storylines because what happens if Jared McCain gets drafted to the Supersonics and now they have a first round matchup with the OKC Thunder. Like that, those are the type of storylines that type of move could activate in the NBA.
Yeah, for sure. You talked about how, Seattle and Vegas have, sports bases that would welcome an NBA team. I mean, we've seen it with the Seattle Storm and the Vegas Aces. Both of those teams are consistently at the top of the attendance records in
Right.
the WNBA. So
Hmm.
I wanted to ask, are those two the cities, or would you replace one with another city like, a Cincinnati or something like that?
I think those two are the cities. I think you have history there when it comes to Seattle. Like that one just makes sense. You don't have to rework a brand or try to find something marketable and appealing to the base. And then you look at Las Vegas, it's weirdly the sports hub of the world right now. The biggest boxing events every year go on at the MGM Grand. UFC makes a stop there at least once a year. F1 just picked up a contract with Vegas and they're having races there. The WNBA just put a franchise there. The Las Vegas Raiders, obviously, they just moved there. WWE had WrestleMania there. So everyone's finding a reason to go to Las Vegas. And I think the NBA is frankly a bit overdue in
Honestly.
tapping into that market because they do utilize it for summer league, but it's something that just makes too much sense. And I mean, I could be forgetting other cities. Is there anyone that you would add to the list? I'm not thinking anyone that pops off the page right now, but to me, those two cities are the easiest to get this relocation or expansion, I should say, started.
Yeah, honestly, I think those are the two cities. Cincinnati came to mind. Uh, I mean, they had an NBA team a long time ago, the Royals.
Yeah.
And I also kind of thought, getting another team in Canada, maybe going
Hmm.
back to Vancouver, but I don't know, especially with the Seattle team. It'd be hard to have both of those teams super close together. And
Right.
the Grizzlies, they weren't that successful up there, so I don't know.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think Seattle and Vegas are the two cities.
Yeah.
And the NBA, like you said, they're overdue. I mean, the NHL has a team in Vegas already who's already won the Stanley Cup. The
Hmm.
NFL moved there. MLB, I think this upcoming season will be the first season there. The WNBA is there. So yeah, the NBA might as well, right?
Right.
So just like a ballpark, you think around the league, who all's protected, who's all unprotected. Who do you think would go number one in an expansion draft?
That's a great question. Let me pull up my little roster here and see who I would take. I'm gonna play GM real quick.
Getting
Mm,
on my league, bro.
yeah, yeah, I like this. I like this. So and that's the tough part because looking for a number one is kind of different than just pulling like the best available players. Because I could
Exactly.
see the approach to where we just want the best available talent that makes it tradable, that makes it, all these different things. But if I'm if I'm looking at OKC, if they don't protect Jared McCain, I'm very intrigued. I would I would definitely be taking a look at him. As far as these other teams in the West, I don't think they're super deep, and I'm not seeing anyone like on the benches that would fall under that criteria that I would be overly interested in. Mm. Yeah, it's kind of tough. Either if I'm OKC, I'm taking either McCain, and I'm probably irrational for saying this, but I still very much believe in Topic that he's going to be something special. We're seeing him just get back on the court, but I think he could do something pretty spectacular in due time. But that's very much a process. Now, I look at a team like Miami. Miami is a deep team, and it feels like they haven't shown care for a guy like Khalil Ware. If
Yeah,
Khalil Ware is off the board, I'm picking him up. And even if they don't pick him up, you got Bam, Wiggins, Powell, Hero, Mitchell, Jaquez, Larson. And so that leaves a guy like Nikola Jovic. I think he's really good. And he's another one of those European players that can do a bit of everything for you. And you don't know that maybe if you pull him out of the context of Miami with a very structured system, maybe he could be very special. Maybe he could turn up for you. If I'm trying to put fans in seats, Cam Thomas, pull up. You got the green light, bro. You taking 60 shots a night. It's you, and it's we gonna get a bunch of defenders and rebounders. You ain't gotta worry about nothing else. Go get some
right.
buckets. But I would say those guys. I would also consider. I think he would probably get protected, but Quentin Grimes, based off the way that he hooped at the end of last year,
Yeah,
people have already started to forget he was putting up 20 balls, 30 balls, 40 balls, put up 46 against Houston, and that's a reputable defensive unit.
yeah,
Another guy I would really think about taking from New York is Tyler Kolek. He's not really in their rotation. A lot of y'all know him as the barbecue chicken guy, but he's a very solid young player. Can pass it, score it. We saw him finally get some minutes when Deuce McBride went out, but he played key minutes in their in-season tournament championship win against the Spurs. So there's a couple of guys I would think about, and it all depends. It would really show very quickly how certain franchises feel about a guy, because I
yeah.
think it would be very interesting to see certain franchises say, "Hey, you know, it is what it is. You can walk unprotected." And so I would be interested to see who they deem long term plans. And one guy I forgot to throw out, Terrence Shannon Jr. from Minnesota. I don't think they've given him a lot of love yet, but I think he could be a very, very, very good young player. Let me know if I'm missing anyone, but it's tougher once you actually trying to pick. But
Right.
those are
Yeah.
that's the list of guys I would try to target.
hmm Kind of, I like all of those picks, by the way. But kind of on your last point, about a team maybe just letting some guy go unprotected to maybe not deal with their contract or something like that. I
Yeah.
could see Jordan Poole, being an unprotected player, and he be going number
Mm,
one. I think
I
he
like that.
he could be a great number one option, obviously.
Yeah.
Um, and then my other one would have been maybe Jarris Walker from Indiana. I could see him going unprotected, and he has the potential to be a star in this league. So I could see him, heading a new franchise. I could see that,
Hmm.
but we'll have to see how the expansion, plays out. See if they move, when they move, or if they don't.
Right.
But some other stuff going around with the NBA. We've talked about tanking in our last episode, but another epidemic has been the gambling problem, and it's not going away anytime soon. Ever since the United States legalized sports gambling, period, it's just been ramping up, and it's not a conversation anymore. It's honestly it's baked into the NBA experience these days. A lot of
Yeah.
fans aren't even watching the games to see who wins or loses. They're
Right.
watching to see their props on DraftKings or FanDuel or Prize Picks or whatever.
Yeah.
Like you see it all the time on social media. People's like players over unders and sometimes money lines and all that stuff. That dominates the discourse. Social
Hmm.
media reactions aren't about the wins and losses. They're about, oh, KD didn't get 28 points for me, so now let
Right.
me find his comment section.
Yeah.
You know, or while Trey Murphy didn't grab 4 rebounds for me, let me go
Hmm.
DM him. Something crazy like that. And so that kind of leads me into my question. Do you think it's stamped that NBA fandom has shifted from, team and player loyalty to transactional viewing?
I would say 100%.
And
And
so
this is another thing I'm very passionate about, because I think it's uniquely terrifying when you look at the direction of our world, but more specifically our country. With Grads coming out of college being unemployed at a higher rate than ever, it being harder to land a job now more than any time in American history. Betting can seem like an easy outlet to try to support yourself day to day or to try to support your family, but we all know it's designed for you to fail. What
Mhm.
business has ever been set up to where a corporation was cool with losing money? Think about that. And if you can find one and you can bring it back to me, I'll completely take away this point. Okay, cool. You got me on that. But uh, in all likelihood, I don't believe you'll be able to. And so when you consider that, and you consider the fact that gambling is only there because it's going to turn an immense profit, you realize it's feasting on all the people that A are susceptible to it and B need it. Because there's times when you're out of work and you're trying to put food on the table for your kids, for your family, but this feels like the easiest thing to do, because even if you put a job application out, that's a what, 2-3 week process most times, if they even get back to you.
Uh,
And I'm very concerned about it. And ironically, the viewing pleasure and the quality of basketball is the last thing I care about, because I still think we're watching a very entertaining product. And trust me, I don't like in any way that people are going in with the intention of, I know X, Y, and Z has a bet, so my intention is to fill that bet rather than just to perform. I hate that. I really, I don't like that. But more importantly, I'm looking at all the young men that have DraftKings ads in their face all day long. You turn on the Super Bowl, there was like 12 sports booking ads.
mhm.
It's all over social media. You get free $500 to bet with. Like,
Yeah.
it's so hard to escape because it's pushed as such a viable thing. There's telegrams for it, there's group chats for it. It's pushed as something that's sustainable and can be of help to you. But in reality, it's an addiction. Like, and we all have our vices, we all have different things we struggle with. But once you go down that rabbit hole, like, it can really destroy your life.
Mhm.
And you can look at that as something that is just, it's harmless, I'm putting a few dollars down on it. But if you get up, are you really going to be able to make that big bet cash off? Are you going to hit that 12 leg parlay and then just say, "Hey, I'm done with it"? No, I don't think so. And all these companies know that as well. So I am very, very nervous about the potential harm that could bring to the sports community, and specifically, I'm going to say it again, like young men, vulnerable young men that don't altogether understand how impactful an addiction to betting could be.
Yeah. I mean, it ruins the viewing experience
Yes.
because it could be a great basketball game going on, but Cade hasn't gone over 26 points, and now
Right.
you're out $30 instead of
Hmm.
watching a good game. And you mentioned it's all over the commercials. It's in the broadcast graphics. It's in the in-game segments. Like they'll come back
Right.
from commercial and go our live money line or something, and it'll like change throughout the game.
Hmm.
Um, the courts are sponsored by like DraftKings or FanDuel. I think 4 NBA arenas have in-person betting kiosks, which is crazy to me because on the same hand, the NBA punishes gambling and
Right.
they throw it in everybody's face. But as soon as a player, fine, I'll gamble too, and they can bet on whatever. Like obviously, if they're betting on NBA games, especially the ones they're playing, that deserves consequences.
Yeah.
But you know, even when they're betting on a completely different league, they still get the punishment. And
Hmm.
I don't understand how the NBA can promote gambling 24/7 and then pretend it doesn't shape how their fans and their players behave.
Isn't that interesting? And I'll curtail this rant, but I am very interested to see your perspective on this. For the investigation that we just saw a couple of months ago, that they named Chauncey Billups, Terry Rozier, all these league guys.
Yeah,
I was kind of disappointed because the faces and the headline names that you saw were black men that are players, coaches, etc. You had to do a lot of digging to find out the mob families that were involved,
yeah,
the the higher ups, the execs, the corporate people that were involved in this. In our nation right now, we know there are so many bigger issues than Terry Rozier going out and betting on himself.
yeah,
As messed up as that is, like we both agree, for the viewing experience and just, I think from a morality standpoint, I would prefer not to see that. It's not
yeah,
the basketball product I want to be watching, but it was very disheartening for me to see Cash Patel and the FBI storm out and make Terry Rozier the face of national headlines when there's legitimate criminal families, criminal organizations that are behind this. Why aren't their pictures on it? Terry Rozier is set for life, but they are set for 5, 6, 7, 8 lifetimes because these families most times have been doing it for generations. They
mm,
have wealth built up off the back of different criminal activity. We don't even have to go into that, but it's just unfortunate that it feels like the black man is always made to be an example. And I was just very disappointed in that. And I understand some people might see it as pulling the race car. I don't know how people feel about that. But I just thought it was a very interesting way to roll out a prosecution of a crime when the people that are making the most money off of it, just keeping it very plain and simple, aren't black, and they
mhm,
are the driving force of what's going on. But we're going to pick out the multiple black people involved, the people that are making less money off of it, ironically, and we're going to make them the face of this criminal organization. I was
yeah.
just, I felt a way about that, bro.
No, I'm right there with you. We black people were the scapegoats. I mean, you look
Yeah.
at all the documents and all the social posts that came out. It was this mafia family or this like mob guy or something. But they're going to name Chauncey Billups. They're going to
Yeah.
say the government name of Jonte Porter and Terry
Hmm.
Rozier. So it's weird how they pick and choose who they want to really, you know, push as this is the guy who was doing this, and this is the guy.
Right.
It's weird and honestly not that surprising,
Hmm.
unfortunately. But I feel like that kind of bleeds into my next question for you. We kind of have seen sports gambling shape sports media. Do you agree with that? Do you think that it's dictating how sports media personalities are talking about the game of basketball over actual basketball chatter?
Yes, 100%. We can look at it through a couple of different lenses. On a large scale, ESPN has a betting show. Not
Yeah,
only does ESPN have a betting app, but they have a betting show that walks you through the decisions that they make, why you should bet with them, why you should make the decisions that you make. And that's coming from the number one leader in sports coverage in the United States of America. They're promoting gambling, and they're directly partnered with the NBA. They're directly partnered with the NFL, the NCAA. Like, they are where we go to watch sports. And so it's shaping coverage on a national level, but in the day and age of a content creator and anyone who has a voice online, some of the most prominent figures, you'll see them immediately get up and slander a player because, like we talked about, ah, KD sucks because he didn't get me 25, 5, and 5. He was the last leg to my parlay. He sucks. And we both know how a message that can mean something to me, right? I'm upset at Kevin Durant because he didn't finish my parlay. Other people will genuinely interpret that as Kevin Durant sucks. And like it will influence the way a message is sent out. It's like playing telephone. I could tell you that Cade Cunningham is a bum because he had a singular bad performance. But I'm really upset that it hurt my parlay, it hurt my bet. And then as that message continues to go out, as it gets reposted, as it gets quote tweeted, as it gets commented on, now the narrative is just that Cade Cunningham's a bum. And I think in many ways it influences the way a lot of young people are interpreting sports, are interpreting how well a player is. Because if you finish the parlay, I love you. You're goated. You're like that. But if you
Yeah.
don't, you suck. When we both know there's so much more to sports than that. It's so much more than what a stat line can be, or making sure that you meet a 30-point game. Like we could think back to a guy like Rondo. Rondo was never going to have the most absurd stat line. He would definitely have some. He had nights with like 20 assists, 15 points, 20 assists. But if you needed him to get you 35 points, he's not going to do that. But he would have a crazy impact on the game because he might make a certain cut that draws the defense in, opens up a kick out three. He might apply some ball pressure, get a turnover, or be the guy to force a turnover. So there's just so much that goes into it that I think fans will miss. Like you said, if you're watching the game and I'm really only watching because I need you to hit 30 points, I need you to hit 50 combined points, rebounds, and assists. Like that changes the lens at which you view sports. And personally, for me, I would hate to view sports through that lens.
Yeah. Uh, Honestly, I don't know if it gets better or if it gets worse in the next coming years. But let us know in the comments. Have you found yourself watching the games and thinking about stats, from a prop bet standpoint or just from a basketball fan standpoint? Let us know and be honest. But that, all of that kind of bridges into, our last point, I guess. Lately we've seen competitive games, top tier matchups, the highest talent level in NBA history. But on the other hand, there have been like many changes with the NBA, such as the various tournaments. You said it the last episode. Adam Silver is tournament man. We just talked about it. The gambling promotions. There's been, I think, too harsh of tanking disciplines, and just other, punishments around the league. So, do you think what do you think the league prioritizes? Is it competition? Is it a spectacle? Is it just money? I don't know.
I think the league is frankly like any other business. It prioritizes money.
Yeah.
If the league really cared about its fans and the experience, you would see subtle changes. Because I know for League Pass in New Zealand, you can get every single game, including the playoffs, for every single team. If you buy League Pass Premium in the United States, there are still games you can't watch that aren't, available in your market, and games you can't go back and rewind. I think they show it fairly often that it's it's very dollar centric, because you wouldn't be on Peacock, Amazon Prime, ESPN. I feel like I'm missing more. Peacock, Amazon Prime, ESPN. They got games on NBA TV. You got at least 4 or 5 stations that these games are on. Everything feels like it's about $1 for the NBA. And without going too deep into it, I think we saw last week at All-Star weekend, there's promotion for players to stay very much in line with the league's ties, its connections, the people that it values. And if you step outside of that, it quickly becomes a problem. We've seen in the past with guys like Kyrie, the lengths to which the league went to punish Kyrie for what he did. I think people look back at it now and it was like, that's kind of insane. It's kind of
Yeah.
inhumane to make someone deal with these type of consequences. You would have thought he did something physically heinous or violent for the response that the league had. They dealt with Kevin Porter Jr., more nicely than they did Kyrie Irving. They dealt with
That's
Miles
crazy.
Bridges
Yeah.
sweeter
All-
than they dealt with Kyrie Irving. And it was all for talking about a specific topic and a specific group of people. So I think you can see it all throughout the league. It may not be the most obvious thing. You kind of have to be looking for it, but in their own way, we can see that they prioritize their global connections, and that even extends to like the issues that they had with China a couple of years ago. I know Enos Kanter was speaking out on that, and he may not have like the highest rep among NBA fans. I get that. I don't remember anyone walking around saying that they were an Enos Kanter fan growing up, but he was still speaking on a topic that was kind of pressing and fairly important. But
yeah.
because it went against the league's global ties and it went against the league's opportunity to make money, no one took his side on that. No one gave him a platform to talk about that. So that's my take on it. I think the league is very much prioritizing the dollar. They're kind of slick with it. It may not be the utmost transparent, like it may not be the most obvious way of seeing it, but I believe that the league is always putting a dollar first.
And that's the episode for today. Appreciate you guys tuning in. We talked about post All-Star break contenders, which teams are the real deal. We talked NBA expansion to 32 teams potentially. And we also talked about how gambling has kind of shaped how people view the game of basketball. Next time, we'll talk more about, the home stretch to the playoffs. We'll definitely have some March Madness previews for you guys. And in the meantime, let us know, who are you protecting on your favorite team, and what's your finals matchup right now today in February. Appreciate you guys tuning in.